that language, that lingo, the stakeholders. Every single American is impacted by the Democratic Party's policies, its actions. We're stuck with this awful Trump because you could barely bestir yourself to be a little, even, a lot less awful. If at best you could be just a little tiny. So look, this is just, again, more reason this party is not for me. It's not for the American people. I have to say, on that group, more and more turning me off. So I want to play this clip because they supported Ken Martin. And now he's refusing to take the kind of steps necessary to transform that party into a pro-worker, pro-win. The reason the Democrat Party lost is going to be trade workers, betrayed the fundamental values that Americans want to believe the party espouses. It did that. And unless what we need from our progressive institutions like our revolution is a willingness to confront this evil that is the Democratic Party. And they're not willing to do it. So this is where Joseph Geevarghese, after Ken Martin, was elected to be the DNC chair with the support of our revolution, with the support of our revolution board members, Jane Klebb. When I say board members, Ara Maska and Larry Cohen of CWA in Maryland. Here's Joseph with Brianna Joy Gray on Bad Faith. And let me just get it here. Let me just start this here. So there they are. She's also got
Ken Martin being chosen.
So I want to just stop it right there. We'll get Joseph's response, but it's a dodge or evasion. What do you make of it? Is it good or bad? Are you happy with Martin or aren't you? And listen to how nuanced and evasive Joseph is.
It was a race between Ken Martin and Ben Wickler. Ben was backed.
It was a race between Kamala and Trump. What do you think about the Israeli killing of 40, 50, 60, 70,000 Gazans? Oh, let's look back at what. So that's what we're seeing here. Not any kind of straightforward response, not anything, well, there's things we like about Ken Martin, things we don't. He wasn't great. That's what you say if you want to answer that question in a somewhat nuanced way. You can't say, well, he's answer if you want to defend him. Not just say, whoa, is it true? But you know what? Marianne Ann Williamson was one of the choices.
Billionaires, including Reid Hoffman. He was backed by...
Ben Wickler got all these billionaire endorsements. Now, last I checked, James Clyburn endorsed Ken Martin.
And the reason I want to bring, and then Wickler was also endorsed by Pelosi, Schumer, Jeffries, right? The Democratic financial establishment, I would say, is sometimes you can tell who your friends are by understanding who the opponents
and so by who their enemies are, right? Of course, Jim Clyburn, again, a friend of Martin. But in any event, supported him. Presumably, I'm not saying they do, presumably our revolution has some kind of sway over Ken Martin, some influence. Now, I'll be real come clean. I am trying to get our Revolution Maryland groups to put together a letter, and I've actually drafted one. We'll call on publicly Ken Martin to release that autopsy. We'll see if that letter goes out and what the response is. If it does, I hope it does. We'll see. 2 for autopsy. I've gotten 3 fundraising emails from our revolution. Not one of them meant the betrayal by a candidate who was supported and won with just more money. Can you help? Well, why would I help you when you back a guy who pulls the rug out from under those of us on the left who want the Democrat Party to come clean about the presidency? And when I say that, I don't mean just because it cost us because Trump won. It meant that even if Harris had won, we'd still have an awful president. 46. I hope you're looking forward to a great holiday season. I certainly am. There's an article that Ross Douthat wrote, or Douthat, I'm not sure. And the Douthat is one of the, I guess he would self-proclaim, self-described Republican. on the Times editorial page, but the Times editorial page is such a op-ed page, is such a sewer at this point anyway. It's so pathetic. It's sewer, yeah, it's a sewer because you have people totally defending the genocidal state of Israel, but there's really very little. Who are the two black columnists there, both of whom race-based grievances rather than discussing the class divide, the fact that the Democratic editorial board, its leaders, so they don't talk about the need to unite poor, struggling, and working class people across race lines. Instead, they talk specifically about the problems facing Black Americans, which are real, not denying that, but you don't solve them by pointing fingers. Only capitalist, a corrupt capitalist system that's left so many tens of millions of Americans, hundreds of millions, billions of people worldwide behind, of all races and colors. So that's a huge problem. Jamel Bowie, that's one, and then the other, many to criticize on that editorial page. Michelle Goldberg, maybe a little less awful than the others, but provocative about Michelle Goldberg's articles. I guess Ed Saul might be the best, but they've neutered him too. So really nobody particularly good. Maybe doubt that's about the least bad. So young white men moved to the Republican side of the aisle, moved right. And it's not just white, right? Because we saw that with, I can't remember where it was, but where a guy talks about how, at least in the entertainment industry and in writing and academia over the past 10, 12 years, there have been fewer and fewer jobs available to white men, more and more being occupied by women and people of color. And this is causing understandable dismay among the people as being the victims of what DEI or identity politics. He's saying, hey, this is causing this group of people to move right by white men. Now, at least we're making things a little fairer. You can make that argument. I think what the response would be is it's not really fair now because they've gone too far to the other side. The percentage of white male hires, the percentage who are applying for those jobs, or even the percentage in the American population, right? So maybe 10, 15, I mean, really low numbers. I don't know if they're accurate. I'm just telling you what the piece said. But, 10, 15, 20% of new hires in some of these desirable jobs are 45. So they're seeing a significantly fewer, disproportionately small number of new hires, and promotions are going to white men. And this is helping us, it's not working for us. We have to go somewhere else. I don't really see how that's arguable. People are going to do what they think is best for them. That's just how society works. You're on your own America. If you perceive, and in this case, apparently accurately, that you're not getting where you want to be, in part because of policies that the Democratic Party is espousing, then you're not going to vote for Democrats. You should say, well, for centuries, we got too much, we got too big a piece of the pie. And of course, that's true for many white men. But it's also true that many white men didn't get any kind of pie at all. That many of the homeless, you go back to the 1890s, going all the way back 2 centuries, this guy Jacob Coxey, was they were homeless. They were mad. They weren't getting their pension. They weren't getting anything that would stave them over. And so Coxey put together this army. He called it Coxey's Army of Veterans in the 1890s. In the 1891, 92, soldiers too. Maybe there were some like the Buffalo Soldiers. I'm not really sure. But, you see the pictures because they had photos. They're pretty much all. And they got attacked by cops. They got truncheons and beat up. So if a system isn't working for you, if it isn't working for your group, even if you can intellectually justify that, you're not going to like that system. And now they don't. So too bad. The response should be, we're going to make sure you have enough. We're going to make sure that we have lots of good jobs for people in this country. We're going to fight. Now, you may not get the job that you might have gotten 30 years ago. I'll be honest with you. Because we had discrimination in the past. We're going to try to make things fair. We can never make things totally equal or totally fair. But what we can do is guarantee that you have enough and that you have, maybe you won't get that writing job you want, or you won't get it right away, but you'll be able to apply going down the road. We're going to have more jobs. We're going to have more kids will get to go to college. That's the response. That's the right response. And I don't see that. And it's so upsetting to me. And doubt that I don't really see how you can. And it just seems so clear to me that this is true. The rightward shift, the black pill, the extremism, I still don't quite know what a black pill is. The hard turn against all forms of immigration is not about new tech or post-liberal ideas or jobs. It's just that simple. People don't have decent, fairly paying, interesting for us. We got to go somewhere else. I don't see why that's even controversial. Well, I'm going to finish with, and I don't know if I'm going to finish with, but I'm going to play Brianna Joy Gray because I was disappointed with the way she responded to this. To me, that we've seen constructed, at least since Ronald Reagan, under both Democratic and Republican presidents behind, of all races. That's why we're seeing, again, black people. We're saying, look, Trump's going to tear it all down. Trump's this kind of right-wing populist, but he's against. That would be appealing. It seems so clear to me that it would be. We need to provide a better alternative on the left. The idea even that, yeah, efforts to balance this an understandable backlash. She doesn't want to go there. She wants to say, oh, it's BS. It's not true. We need these policies. I don't think Dowd is saying we shouldn't have those policies. He's saying that. That's what he's saying. I don't think that's arguable. Here's Brianna Joy Gray.
In 2014 sort of era, universities like Yale, and the narrative goes, the Yale English department, let's say, has had, let's say, 10 new hires over the 10-year period. And none of them, or one of them, was a white male, and everybody else was some combination of everybody else. And this is because we want to enter these fields. And toward the end of the article, it acknowledges that part of the reason for this is that the senior positions all remain filled by white men. So the overall numbers are still overwhelmingly white men, but the people in charge aren't actually retiring, leaving those spaces for upward mobility, which would allow for
a good job. They're large and in charge. They're not going to leave it. That's really good to be a department head at Yale. It's interesting. It's exciting work. You're not going to give it up. To expect people to do that, more humanities programs. And how do you do that in an economy like ours, where all the money's in tech and sciences? You have to make a few people like their jobs and want to keep them. You have to create more good jobs.
To be upwardly mobile without having to keep the low.
What we can do is we can get rid of these deadwood at the top and replace them with others, and then everyone will be upwardly mobile. Well, there's a lot wrong with that view. One is we wouldn't all be upwardly mobile. There's still going to be a very limited number of spots at the top. And the people who have those spots aren't going to be, in the end, if you pursue this policy, which is, well, we just want to get rid of a few people at the top and open it up. And I'm resentful. They're going to think it's not fair. I don't, it's just odd to me that you would think, well, it's fine to just, no, it's not fair. It's not fair to say we're going to look at, you were going to be less likely to hire you. And even if they're less deserving, right? Even if they're getting the jobs, They're still going to say, this isn't fair. This isn't right. Our lives aren't what they should be. We work in a restaurant. People do. There's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with that kind of work. But you'll still get decent salary. Still have a nice place to live. You'll still have health care. So you can work on guess what? We're also going to fund education much more than we have. That's the right answer. Not we're going to still have a fair proportion of every different group. So there'll be a fair number of women, fair number of men, fair number of blacks, whites, people from, foreign people, whatever. No, we need more lifeboats. We need to make sure everyone's in a lifeboat and no one's in a beauty. That is what I believe. And I think we have to join together to fight for that if we're ever going to get to the place we need to get to. All right, that's going to do it for my last request. If you haven't yet done so, do subscribe. And if you have subscribed, please interact in some way, some form with our video about politics. Have a great afternoon. Thanks so much for being part of Politics. Have a great end of the year, and I will see you.
If the Grinch tries to pull that shit again, all right, he is not.
Whoa, how long have you had that?
Right? Google has very loose stand your ground.
Uh-oh, MAGA Mike Johnson, your words are coming back to haunt you. Is blowing up in your face, is blowing up in his face. And thank you for laying out the framework for what the cover-up, the criminal cover-up of this child sex trafficking ring is going to be, because you laid out the roadmap of the criminality. And MAGA Mike, you've now implicated yourself in that's going to be your legacy. And when the law brings you to justice in a few years, let's bring out the receipts and go through what some bait clause. I don't know with this level of criminality, MAGA Mike. I just don't think your future's looking good, MAGA Mike. So let's just go through it piece by piece and let me present it to you as if I was the prosecutor, hypothetically, of course, prosecuting MAGA argument. I'll do a closing argument. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, throughout this trial, you've heard about the heinous and despicable conduct by a little man named MAGA Mike Depravity, including covering up a child sex trafficking ring, and he laid out the conspiracy for us right before the Trump regime effectuated that conspiracy to cover up a child sex trafficking ring. Specifically, back in November, that he was being asked about his cover-up of the Epstein files back then, said, Epstein, why do you keep asking me about Epstein? Here, play this clip.
They're trying to attack President Trump. This is what they've done. They weaponized the justice system over the last several years to go after him, and this is their latest attempt. And they don't have a Democrat Party side, so they put all their eggs in this basket. And that's why you hear endlessly about Epstein. Everything's about Epstein.
And then perhaps MAGA Mike Johnson revealed more than maybe said that Donald Trump was actually an FBI informant, that Trump may have been wired up working with the FBI to bring down Jeffrey Epstein, real estate transactions. And so in order to stop Epstein from going after Trump, did Trump go to the FBI as a CI? Could that have happened? Weird words for the Speaker of the House to say the president avoid his own criminality by helping the FBI or by helping the local Miami police then? Is that why Acosta became... Is that why MAGA Mike back in 2007, when Acosta gave Jeffrey Epstein the sweetheart deal, it also gave a provision that has never been seen before in any of these immunity deals? Legal nature, MAGA Mike. Here was MAGA Mike saying that it was Donald Trump was a confidential informant. Play this clip.
He's not saying that what Epstein did is a hoax. It's a terrible, unspeakable evil. He believes that himself. When he first heard the rumor, he kicked him out of Mar-a-Lago. He was an FBI informant to try to take this stuff down. The president knows and has great sympathy for the women who have suffered these unspeakable harms. It's detestable.
It's like a day later. He's like, I didn't really mean confidential informant. What I mean is that Donald Trump just wants to get...
Conversation was what the victim's attorney said. More than a decade ago, President Trump kicked Epstein out of Mar-a-Lago, and he was one of the only people, one of the only prominent people, as everyone has reported, not President Trump, but everybody about him, that he was willing to help law enforcement go after this guy who was a disgusting child abuser, sex trafficker. All the allegations. The president was helpful in that. I don't know if I use the right terminology, but that's common knowledge, and everybody knows that. So this is much ado about nothing.
Did the president tell you this specifically about his involvement?
I said I was recounting what others have said. The president and I have talked about the Epstein evils many times. He's just disgusted by it. As I said repeatedly, he wants everything to come out, all credible information, everything for the American public to decide.
Was he ever asked to wear a wire or anything like that?
I have no idea. No, I'm not saying that. I have no information about that whatsoever. I was repeating what has been common knowledge for a long time. The president, for the law enforcement to go after Epstein. That's always been my understanding. That's common knowledge. It's the public's understanding. I was not breaking news there, okay?
And throughout the trial, we've heard more from MAGA Mike. And one of the things we heard from MAGA Mike is that who he was really concerned about throughout all of this was covering up for the perpetrators, the rich and wealthy, and the powerful politicians who were co-conspirators of Epstein. The perpetrators is who MAGA Mike considered to be the victims, the new victims. So when MAGA Mike was trying to obstruct the discharge petition from being signed for the Epstein Transparency Act to become a law, that the perpetrators, that the men who engaged in the vile conduct of the underage girls, that they were the victims. How saying that the men who engaged in the underage sex trafficking ring, that the men were the victims? It's what MAGA Mike's saying.
Let the DOJ to release information, even in cases where the DOJ or the FBI has already, those who have may just have known Epstein, but knew nothing of his crimes or whose names he exploited. Think of this, innocent people, and they had nothing to do with this. And so by just haphazardly releasing it, you're going to destroy their reputations. Releasing information, clear their names. That's a concern of Congress, and it should be. It should be.
Sometimes the best gift you could give the people you love isn't another thing.
He said that there were national security concerns involving the files, that our national security, our intelligence could be compromised. At the same time, ladies and gentlemen of the jury, that Donald Miami, that wasn't a security concern, but this helping vindicate the victims, the survivors, that was a national security concern. Here, play this clip.
It jeopardizes future federal investigations, and we have national security concerns regarding classified information. We'll put this in the record because we need the legislative record to reflect What is the legislature?
Trump has nothing to do with anything, nothing to do with it. Play this clip.
Trying to somehow tie President Trump to the scandal. President Trump has nothing to do with it. He has said himself he has nothing to hide, and that's clearly what they've been trying to do. They're trying to over the last several years to go after him, and this is their latest attempt.
MAGA Mike Johnson said that they wanted maximum transparency when giving you zero. Here, play this clip.
These ladies who've come forward, they estimate there may be as many as 1,000 young women who were subjected to these heinous. It would compound the harm that they've already suffered, and so we want to protect those people. That's the sum total of all of this. That's our responsibility. And short of that, we want maximum transparency. And that is exactly what the American people are getting right now.
And folks, even when MAGA Mike was confronted with an obvious birthstein back in 2003 for Epstein's 50th birthday that we all know Donald Trump wrote, that we saw his handwriting, we saw the letter. What do you think happened? That a time traveler went back to 2003 and planted the Trump letter at the time exactly like Trump's signature, where they talked about their underage enigmas and that their secrets always will remain there. Really? Well, here's MAGA Mike says, I don't believe it's real. I don't believe that that's a real thing. That's clip.
Mr. Speaker, do you think the Trump birthday note to Epstein is real?
I don't. They say it's not.
And who else was involved in this? No depths to his depravity as well. He laid it out to MAGA Mike, channeling the messages from their Führer, Donald Trump. We better be united. We can't waste our time on this. Let's play this clip.
We have a lot to run on, and you have a lot to run against, given the other party. But I will focus on, I've about had it with all that stuff. We better focus on who we are, what we're doing, where we want to take the country, and what they want to do to the country. Mr. Speaker, God bless you, my friend. I appreciate you very, very much.
You too, Mark. Thanks for all you do. God bless.
And then more from MAGA Mike when he was on Meet the Press with Kristen Welker. Should all of the Epstein files be released? And MAGA Mike would use this word. All credible evidence. Okay, all credible. Interesting, because now you're saying that the letter that was sent by Epstein.
11 Republicans as well. Let me just ask you, because I hear you saying that, yes, the files should look.
Yes, I agree with President Trump, with the Department of Justice, with the process. There's a reason, for example, that grand jury materials are protected under the federal rules of criminal procedure, because they're not to be put out and was not even credible enough to be entered into the court proceedings. And that would be a dangerous thing. Our main concern here, though, is the protection of the innocent victims. I mean, these are minors in many cases who were subjected to unspeakable crimes, abject evil. They've already suffered great harm. We do not need their names being unmasked.
Well, there you have it, folks. MAGA Mike, 6 million subscribers, and thank you for watching.
Love this video? Support independent media and unlock exclusive content, ad-free videos, and custom emojis by becoming
Why not? Good morning, and if you have kids watching this video, just beware. I might say some things about Santa Claus that you don't want to make us believe that we weren't good kids and so Santa didn't show up. We lived in a shotgun house, and so the first room you walk into my room and so forth, right? Then you get to the back of the house and that's the kitchen. Well, anytime we would get up in the morning on Christmas, we would go into those. Santa didn't show up. We were crying and stuff. And I know some of you guys are thinking, damn, that's cruel. But you know, over the time I think about these type of stories, and that's just how my dad, I should have been good. You guys weren't good, you know? And then later that night, toys showed up. He said, Santa decided you guys were being good today, so he decided to go ahead and just bike together or whatever, right? And I remember looking outside and like, I swear, like the way I remember it, every neighbor was bringing in a bike at like 3 a.m. or something. It felt like I was lying to them. It just felt like I was just telling them a lie that didn't need to be told. I didn't want to be like Scrooge playing along with this stuff. So we did the Santa thing, right? We took our daughters to you know, the Polar Express train and things like that. Well, my oldest daughter, she's 6 or something like that. She's like, Dad, you know, I was thinking the other day and like, I just don't know about this whole Easter Bunny thing. She's like, how's the Easter Bunny get around, you know? And then she pauses for a second. She goes, Dad, I don't think I believe in Santa either. And at that point, I'm sister, you know, she's like, oh yeah, you know? Well, I'll never forget, we're at the mall one time and she's like 7 and my other Santa type of thing. It just wasn't something we did. But that particular day, there was a really short line. And I was like, hey, let's go get pictures with Santa. Random dude's lap. And I'm not comfortable letting my little sister sit on some random, you know? And so we never really did that too much, but it was always funny because we had fun. She kind of like let us believe she believed longer because, you know, there was always that extra gift or the elf on the shelf was going to get her something and all that. So I think that was her kind of thing. But you know, no matter like what's going on, no matter how like maybe things have gone rough throughout the year or whatever, when you can just get with your family and just have big forehead and, you know, stuff like that. And, you know, uncle dresses like an old man and, you know, just stuff. And, you know, just having the end of that game was freaking awesome and everything. It was just cool to be with family and, you know, and all that. So I sent them a dance like a week ago because that's just kind of my thing. We're going to do a TikTok. We're going to do something funny while I'm over, you know. And so I sent them the I don't know, maybe 7 or 8 takes because people were like, oh, I didn't like that take or I messed up and so forth and so on. But we did the TikTok and now just enjoy the people who you're the closest with, the people that you love the most and have fun with them. And you know, just, yeah, like I said, just enjoy your day. So let me show you guys this TikTok. So in that video was myself front and center, my 2 nephews on the outside of me, my niece, my sister.
Also, so terrible. What do I mean by that? Well, if you've got one in such a way that can cause catastrophic damage to your home's heating system, but they can also cause significant damage to your home itself if you simply let them run unattended very quickly without you having to do anything. Also makes them a problem when the temperature outside gets very cold. But today, back then I was living in a different home and I didn't have one of these. But the bigger reason was that if you want to add, plus freestanding units don't care what kind of heating system you have. So if your home is heated with radiators or some other kind of ductless heating system, like certain kinds of heat pump, those will work fine to a water line. So it's not universal and it's much more involved. And as I already said, these things is. There are several types of these things on the market, but most of them are similar to this one, distributed throughout my home. It's quite a simple device. Where's the water coming from? It's coming from right here. When the humidifier is running, this solenoid valve opens, and in fact, once it's saturated, you'll see a trickle of water coming out the bottom. The valve is deliberately letting more water through than the air going through the pad can exhaust here, but I can tell you I have never noticed an increase in my water bill between heating and cooling seasons. So it's not that much. Soaking wet, it gets pretty gross and needs regular replacement. How often you'll need to do that depends largely on your water hardness, but even still, this is what last year's pad looks like. It used to be white, and now it's pink and crunchy because of all getting a little gross. Remember that thing I said about these needing much more attention than you might expect? Well, one day I heard the water valve open, but I didn't hear them into the fan blades, holding them stationary. I'm honestly quite lucky that it didn't cause any damage to my furnace, because the water valve exact thing happened which fried the furnace's control board. So yeah, these are not set and forget. You really need to be cognizant by my water heater. This style of humidifier generally works better when the water which is saturating the pad is hot. Now, since this is just a fan that grabs some air from the duct, gets it moist, and then puts it back into the duct, it relies on the furnace pushing air through the ductwork in order to distribute its work and actually increase the humidity in my home. If it were for some reason running when the furnace's blower wasn't, well, it would pretty quickly cause a problem. The air in that ductwork would get extremely humid, and water would start condensing onto things which ought not get wet. Luckily, there's an easy solution to that. 120-volt line voltage for its fan motor, but the fan is controlled via a current-sensing relay which detects that the water valve is open. So if the water valve is open, the fan will run. This ultimately means if you wire that water valve across the common wire and the heat signal wire coming from the thermostat, then the humidifier will operate when your thermostat is calling for heat. This setup not only ensures the blower will be running when the humidifier is on, but it also means the humidifier won't run during a cooling call. So if you forget to switch it off at the end of the heating season, it's no big deal. But the humidifier can't simply run whenever the heat's on. That would likely result in over-humidification, which could be uncomfortable or even cause mold issues. Analog doodad, which sits in the return airstream and closes the switch when the humidity is lower than your desired set point. So long as that switch is closed and the thermostat is calling for heat, then the humidifier will run. But once the humidifier has elevated humidity to your set point, that switch will open and the humidifier will shut off, but it works great. Except for when it doesn't. First of all, you may remember from a previous video of mine that my home's furnace is oversized by nearly a factor of 4. This means on most days it only runs for 2, maybe 3 hours. And that's not enough time for the humidifier to actually be effective. That's a problem specific to my home, but it was very annoying. However, there was a fix for this issue. Instead of hooking the humidifier's water valve to the heat signal wire, I changed it to the fan signal wire. This meant the humidifier was able to run so long as my thermostat was calling for the blower fan, and by setting a fan schedule on my thermostat which ensured the fan ran for 15 minutes every hour, nice and comfy and free of static shocks. This scenario is why the manufacturer wants this thing hooked to hot water. If it's running during a heating call, the air running during a fan call, that air is only at room temperature and the water won't evaporate as quickly. Honestly though, I have a hunch it would actually work fine if it were hooked up to cold water, and the real reason they want it hooked to hot water is to minimize the cooling which would occur as water evaporates. This thing is basically a swamp cooler, and it will drop the temperature of the air leaving the vents if it's running, but if the contaminated. But anyway, that's not important. What is important is this little note you may have spotted on the humidistat. This thing wants you to turn the humidity set point. This could simply be an inconvenience, maybe you'll have some water puddling on windowsills, but it could also lead to mold growth with notes like this though. You're lucky if people read them, and you're even luckier if people remember about them. I'm a people, and I have forgotten about this several times. Usually what happens is the temperature plummets overnight, and when I get up the windows are soaking wet. So then I go downstairs to the furnace closet. Quick reminder for you home builders out there, this can all just go in a closet! It never has to go in an attic. The 20 square feet or so taken up by this stuff in the floor plan is absolutely worth being able to get at it without a ladder. Priorities, man. Get some. As I was saying, I go downstairs to the furnace closet, turn this down, and then look up. Given all that hassle, it sure would be nice if there were humidistats out there that were aware of the outdoor temperature and could automatically adjust the indoor humidity set point down during those cold snaps. Oh wait, those exist! But, well, gosh darn it, they're gonna need a wire run to an outdoor temperature sensor. And do would be to run a wire across the garage and maybe slip it past the garage door seal, but I didn't like that idea, and I really didn't like the idea of drilling holes in walls or having random wires going all over the time. And then, about 2 weeks ago, I finally remembered about that pipe that brings in outside air for the furnace. Yeah, this pipe here, it goes all the way outside. The pipe is closed up, the combustion section of this furnace is effectively outdoors. It draws in fresh air through here, which brings in enough oxygen to set some methane on fire, and then pushes the exhaust gases out this other pipe. Fire through this pipe the whole time. Yeah, better late than never. Now, quick note, some of the fancier thermostats out there are able to control a humidifier directly. I don't have one of those, I just have a basic Nest, which irritates me for several reasons, but mostly works and I somewhat begrudgingly put up with. A fancier Nest or some other smart thermostat which knows the outside temperature through the internet, and then allowed it to control the humidifier. But quite frankly, I am trusting internet-based solutions less and less. The insight, I kinda get it. When you buy a humidifier, it's going to come with one of these, but my humidifier apparently came with this dumb one, and I want a smarter one. And since apparently nobody but specialty supply houses stocks these things, off to Amazon I went. I found this Honeywell model as well as this Aprilaire model, and this suspicious clone of the Aprilaire model. Since I have an Aprilaire 700 series, and so I did. Annoyingly, the product listing gave no information on how long the outdoor air temperature sensor wire was. I'd need about 30 feet of wire, and I figured it would be reasonable for them to include a suspiciously cheap tool store and got myself a suspiciously cheap 50-foot fish tape. I'm sorry, no. It's a 50-fish T-ape. I tried to run the fish tape directly through where the pipe ends inside the furnace, but I wasn't too hopeful that that would work as there's a lot of bendy-bendy in those pipes. And indeed, and triple checking that I was about to drill through the intake pipe and not the exhaust pipe, I made my hole. And the fish tape went in nice and smooth for a good long while, but then it hit something. I remembered a trick I saw on the internet somewhere. I took some lightweight twine and tied it to the end of a shopping bag, and then I stuffed it into the pipe. Then I went outside with my vacuum cleaner, which had an attachment that fit nearly perfectly into that pipe, and gave it a toot. I am terribly sorry that I left. I honestly could not believe how well that worked, but I was sure glad it did. Too bad I already drilled that hole, I guess. With the bag and the twine now at the other end of the pipe, I pulled it out and tied a wire to the end of the twine. I wasn't planning to use speaker wire for this, but since this pipe is apparently twistier than I realized, I went inside and started pulling on the twine. It was going so well, but then... But! A Christmas miracle! It made it past that hole I drilled, and with some picks, I was able to get it out. Good thing I already drilled that hole, I guess. I pulled out about 10 feet of wire from that hole, and then I went outside, cut it back until the sensor was dangling down at the very end of the intake pipe. And that's where I decided to leave it. Then I taped the wire in place and made a big old booger of silicone to seal up that hole in the pipe. But I am confident that this location is fine. For one, when the furnace is running, it will be drawing fresh air up and through the tube past the sensor, so the heat from the exhaust shouldn't matter. My water heater exhaust is also in this area, which hours or so. And one day, I want to get a heat pump water heater. I could have, of course, actually pulled the wire out of the bottom of that pipe and mounted the sensor somewhere if I were concerned, but I wasn't, so I didn't. Alright, with the outdoor temp sensor in place, it was time to install the new humidistat. It needs a 3/4 inch hole in the return duct to get a measurement of relative humidity. And I was hopeful the existing humidistat would have a similar hole in the sheet metal, which now presented me with a problem. I elected to seal that hole with some duct tape and mount the new humidistat lower down. I didn't have a 3/4 inch drill bit, so I simply abused my 1/2 inch drill bit and made this beautiful hole. Love about this humidistat. For my home, it's perfect. I don't actually have any return ducting at all. The enclosed bedrooms upstairs have vents way down to the lower level where the furnace is. And since the main level is basically one big room, the staircase itself is the return air path, and all the furnace needs is one giant intake vent at the bottom of the stairs. That's what's on the other side of the duct I've just attached the control to. My home's setup means that whenever the furnace blower is running, the humidity sensor to be somewhere else. In those cases, you might be better off getting a fancier thermostat which can control a humidifier remotely. But if your home's HVAC system was designed reasonably well, like mine was, taking a reading of the air entering the furnace or air handling call in an hour, it will kick on the blower so it can stir the air up for a while, get an accurate humidity reading, and then, if it's too low, it will switch the humidifier on and keep the blower running, regardless of what the thermostat's commanding. This is a pretty neat feature, and it means I can remove the fan schedule from my thermostat. But it also means this now needs a way to control the furnace. But in addition to that, it also wants to know if the thermostat is calling for heat. It wants to be connected to R and C, giving it a 24-volt power source from the furnace, W, so it can see a heating call in progress, and it wants me to then I need to run a new G wire, called GF, back from the humidistat and land it on the G terminal in the furnace. This setup is what allows the humidistat to force the furnace blower on, but it wires to the 2 H terminals on the board and the outdoor temperature sensor. With that done, all that was needed was to turn the furnace back on and test it out. Hopefully I didn't blow anything up. I think the outdoor temperature is high enough for it to run if I turn it to 6. But we'll see. So the board woke up, and the relay not actually running. Well. Alright, with the help of a multimeter and some troubleshooting, I have figured out what's going on here, and now I'm 2007. Apparently they've been making them like these forever. There's some difference in the wiring. Well, this humidifier is definitely newer than that, but it's not working. Well, it turns out I don't have a 700, I have a 700M. And you would think, right, that M stands for manual. The only difference between those models is you get the manual control, the one that I just replaced, or this digital control. But in fact, the 700M gets its 24-volt transformer inside, and all this is doing is bridging these two contacts through this relay. But the manual humidifier needs to get 24 volts AC, which is going to be possible with this. I have to do a little bit of sanity checking to make sure I wire it correctly, but I'm going to have to jump either R or C over to one side of this, like the original control. Now, why on earth does Aprilaire choose to distinguish them in this way? I don't know, but it's really frustrating, and they clearly don't want people figuring out how to... This is just a relay. One of these relays does the humidifier, the other relay forces the furnace fan on, but they do not give you a wiring diagram for how to use this with the manual model, even though it's completely possible. Quite part of that, but man, this is dumb. Okay, my modifications are complete. Now this is going to look very confusing because I don't have almost none of these wire colors are correct. I'm actually using garage door opener sensor wire. Yeah, but it should work. Basically, I now have red and blues, this is 24 volts in common, taken off of the input, and then I have a separate lead humidifier are wired in parallel. But the humidifiers return, it's landing on one of the H terminals, and then the other H terminal is coming back to this common point. So basically, the humidifier would run all the time if this relay is closed. But there's really nothing left to do except turn this back on and hope for the best. Now, I know it's safe to do this because the worst thing that would happen is I will blow the furnace's power supply fuse. And it's probably an automotive fuse. I may even have a spare on hand, but it will be... Here is the moment of truth, part 2. Okay, it's on. We're gonna blow our atoms on. What is this test? Oh, well that works. And look at that, the humidifier's running. Now, is the blower actually running? It's hard to tell when the humidifier is on as well. Oh, for sure it is. So that worked correctly. I want to make sure this actually shuts off now. Awesome. With that rather ugly but functional wiring modification, this is now working as I expected it to. Energize this relay, which forces the furnace fan to run, and that allows it to perform its own check of the ambient humidity level on an hourly basis. If, during that check, it finds that it's lower than the set point, we're up to the humidifier's water valve, which will switch it on. And, of course, that will increase the humidity in my home. But once it reaches the set point, the humidity sensor will detect that, at which point it will turn the humidifier off. That will all happen regardless of what my thermostat's doing. If, though, my thermostat is commanding the heat to run, the humidistat is now aware of that, thanks to the fact that it's hooked up to the W terminal on the furnace board. So, as before, if the humidity is bent once it's satisfied, it shuts the humidifier off. Now, none of this is really new. My old setup with the humidifier connected to the fan went into my thermostat's programming to make it command the fan during a heating call. Something that's not necessary for my heating system to work, but which allowed the humidifier to run during a heating call too. So, when it comes to the basic functionality of the humidifier, outdoor air temperature is, I no longer have to think about that. It will automatically reduce the humidity set point as the ambient temperature outside falls. This chart here explains how the humidifier will adjust the set point based on the outdoor temperature reading. The recommended setting, 5, will allow the humidity to get as high as 45%, but will start lowering it when the outdoor temp is 30 degrees Fahrenheit, which is just a hair below freezing. I know that my home, and actually, this is my biggest disappointment with this thing. I would like setting 6 to shoot for 50% humidity when it's above freezing outside, but the highest this will ever go is 45%. That's not a big difference, but I can notice it. Still, I will happily sacrifice that for the peace of mind that this will automatically reduce its output in those cold snaps, ring around 45%, so it's doing its job and seems to be accurate. Or, I guess, at least my thermostat agrees with it. The other thing I don't like about this? It won't tell me what it thinks the outdoor temperature is. It should throw an error code if the sensor goes bad, but what if the sensor is simply drifting over time? Since I've installed this, the outdoor temperature hasn't fallen much below freezing, so I'm not even sure yet that it's working as intended. That's cool since, you know, that's the whole reason I did this. But we're supposed to get a cold snap shortly after Christmas, and I'll do one of those community posts once we've gone through that. And I'll pin a comment here too. Aside from the absolute ridiculousness of the humidifier, I am very happy to have made this upgrade. But to circle back to the beginning of this video, while the main point of doing this is to make my humidifier something closer to set and forget, it's still absolutely not set and forget. The potential for leaks is still there. The potential for a deteriorating water pad is still there. And while I hope its outdoor temperature sensor will work reliably for years to come, the potential is still there. I will absolutely still be monitoring my home's humidity level and the function of the humidifier, and I suggest that anybody out there with one of these things check on it at least monthly and preferably weekly. That, I think, is the biggest argument for choosing a large, freestanding humidifier over one of these things. Sure, it's annoying to fill those up with water every day or two, especially considering that you take up space. But when you have to keep interacting with it in order for it to keep working, you'll be more likely to notice problems. Plus, if its tank were to start leaking, at most you'll have a few gallons of water on the floor. This thing's plumbed to full water pressure, which means leaks could be much more catastrophic. I have a floor drain in this furnace closet, so I'm not too worried about that, but still, it could cause major damage. Just admit it has been very nice to have this machine keeping the air comfortable without having to fill up a weird 2-gallon bottle every couple of days. And now that the humidistat knows the outdoor air temperature, I'll be slightly more at peace knowing that I can't forget to turn it down. I'm still going to be checking on the humidifier every week or so to make sure the fan does its job. Assuming it does though, this is as close to set and forget as you can reasonably make one of these. And that makes me happy. Like my old setup, I'll have to remember to turn this off when the weather gets warm. If I don't, it may try to add humidity when that's the last thing I want. Yay, Midwest! Second, at time of filming, I haven't yet verified whether or not it knows the thermostat is commanding the fan. It should, but I didn't think to actually test that before I got here and shot the talking head. Here's the answer. Fan calls, so that is working as I expected. And third, this thing's humidity sensor does a reasonable job, but I have noticed that the displayed humidity falls quite dramatically as soon as I open the door to the furnace closet. It drops by about 5 in the same room that the furnace is pulling air from, and based on what my thermostat is telling me, it doesn't seem to matter, but clearly the sensor is being affected by the air around it and not just inside the duct. That makes complete sense based on this thing's design, and it would really be improved if it had some sort of remote sensor you could shove deep into the duct. Plus, if you wanted. I know there are plenty of climates out there where the idea of wanting to add moisture to the air is abhorrent, but I'm surprised how terrible the options seem to be for central ducted humidifier controls. They are simple things, yes, but we could be doing so much better. Humidistat the whole time. It's crunchy. Crunchy, not chunky. Ugh. This thing is basically a swamp cooler and will drop the temperature of the air leaving the vents if it's running. But the pad... I missed the word if. Then I taped the wire in place and made it a farts. That's what's on the other side of the duct of farts.
We have a massive breaking news update in the ongoing Epstein Files scandal, and that news is this. The Trump Justice Department is now publicly admitting if you end up liking
begin